Elijah Craig Barrel Proof Batch A122. Are we back on track? Only one way to find out. Let's do this. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for joining me today. First and foremost, I have to say a big thank you to my buddy Marty from Whiskey Nose for getting this bottle to me for me to do today's review of. So Marty, thanks for sending this bottle my way. Appreciate it. What is it that the newest batch A122 has to offer that maybe some of the prior batches haven't had? Before we do that, let's dive into a few of the specs of the newest Elijah Craig Barrel Proof Batch A122. So the Elijah Craig Barrel Proof Batch A122 comes in at a proof of 120.8. Mash bill is 78% corn, 10% rye, 12% malted barley. It is age stated as 12 years. And the MSRP on this is a pretty friendly $70 considering what it is. So let's go ahead and dive into the review. Really excited to kind of get into this. The Elijah Craig Barrel Proofs for me are always pretty consistent. We get a little nitpicky with some of these at times where some are better than others. But again, it's one of those bourbons that no matter what, you're probably going to be buying it and enjoying it. Let's find out what the batch A122 has to offer. Color-wise, as you can see, and this is a big, bold kind of mahogany color, very typical of the Elijah Craig Barrel Proofs. Always get that nice mahogany type color. Very oily as you move it around the glass, so that's always a nice thing to see. All right, so let's go ahead and dive into the nose. So my first thought right away is liquid rickhouse. If you've ever been in a rickhouse and experienced that smell between the barrels, just the rickhouse itself, the bourbon, all the angel share, that overall nosing experience in a rickhouse is exactly what this smells like in a glass. Incredible brown sugars on this, probably some of the heavier brown sugars that I've nosed on an Elijah Craig Barrel Proof in some time. Deep, rich. Maybe even a slight bit of molasses on this. And I'll say there's a little bit of like a pecan note there. You do get a nuttiness on a lot of the Elijah Craig Barrel Proofs, but this is more of a pecan. And maybe I'd even go as far as saying like a praline pecan type of ice cream where you're kind of getting mixed with that custard and the pecan kind of mixed together. There's that richness that's there to it. Definitely some of that nice, rich, sweet oak presence. Nice amount of cinnamon. This is more of a fresh cinnamon. And I'll even say I'm getting a slight like root beer note. There's something about it that I'm picking up this root beer note. This is maybe, again, with that root beer note, maybe even a root beer float. There's something that's creamy and this custard type of nose to it so far. You're not getting the, I'll say, the typical nuttiness that you get where it's more of a peanut sometimes on a lot of the Elijah Craig. For me, again, this is kind of going back to that richness of the pecan or praline pecan kind of ice cream. There's just this richness and decadence about it on the nose. As I begin to kind of nose this a little bit more of that vanilla is starting to kind of come out in this. And I'll say this, even as it begins to kind of like open up more or a little bit of that heavier char influence, that barrel influence is starting to come out a little bit more. Lending itself to leaning towards those kind of like dark chocolates, maybe an espresso type of coffee. There's just this richness that's behind this. Really incredible vanillas, caramels are really starting to kind of shine in this. It's more of like a fresh caramel. Like if you were kind of melting some caramel, that's kind of what you're getting with this. All right, more importantly, let's see how this bad boy is going to taste. Cheers. So just like I was getting on the nose, for me, my first impression is to want to go to that liquid rickhouse effect. There is something that is so strong and in my mind when not only nosing this, but tasting this, that rickhouse effect is just in my mind between all the barrels, the angel share, the old like wood ricks, all of that combined is what this is tasting like in a glass. Absolutely incredible. That sweet oak, that really nice char that's there, that combination, absolutely incredible. The vanilla custard, and again, like I used to get or I've gotten on some other Elijah Craig barrel proofs, rather than this kind of peanut influence, for me, it's more of a flavorful, like pecan note than anything. And there's a little bit of a roasted pecan note is kind of what I'm picking up along the way as well. Really, really enjoy that vanilla custard influence that's there. Even starting to pull out some of those dark fruits. This along the lines is more of that dark kind of cherry note. Maybe not quite as sweet as like a Luxardo, but like kind of a black cherry, something along those lines. Something that's more big, bold, rich. That's definitely sitting right there on the palate. I'll maybe even go as far as saying there's a little bit of like a date influence on these. So you'll get at times that really richness, maybe even a sweetness from a date. There is a little bit of that influence that's there, along with maybe that dark or black cherry that's there too. Still want to come back to that root beer note. Maybe even again like that root beer float. There's again that creamy, kind of custardy root beer note that's there. I mean, very pleasant. So if you've ever had a root beer float, this is kind of partially what I'm getting on this. It's a really, really nice bourbon so far. That rickhouse effect on this for me is maybe more present than I can ever really remember with an Elijah Craig barrel proof. There is just something about this batch that is just lending itself to wanting to think that you're sitting in a rickhouse, maybe with some good friends, enjoying a great glass of bourbon. This has that written all over. This is for me at this proof where I think a lot of the Elijah Craig barrel proofs shine. This for me seems to be that sweet spot for the Elijah Craig barrel proof. In or at that 120-ish proof, give or take. For me, it just drinks perfectly. For everything that I've described, it's an incredible bourbon. Well worth 70 bucks. I mean, I'd even say if this was in that $150 range, I would have no problem paying that kind of price for a bourbon like this with this kind of profile. The longer it wants to sit on the palate, the more of that kind of sweet pipe tobacco. In addition to, I'll even say this, there's a little bit of that cigar tobacco that's there as well. Nice combination, leathers. Again, just that overall vanilla caramel sweetness, that rickhouse effect. Just an incredible, incredible bourbon. I think that they've absolutely nailed this. I can't wait to see where the B and C batch go from here. This is setting a pretty high mark for the year 2022 releases. So if this is any indication of where they're going, they're absolutely heading in the right direction. So if we kind of get into or kind of discuss the finish on it, I'll say this. It's nice and long, it's mouth coating, it's viscous. You get everything that I've basically described along the way that just still remains. If you could somehow bottle a rickhouse, to me, this would be the perfect description of what that bourbon is tasting like. So there you have it. Elijah Craig Barrel Proof Batch A122. For me, I think they've nailed this one, knocked it out of the park. Whatever analogy you want to give it, for me, this is an incredible bourbon, and I would say immediately if you can find the Batch A122, buy it, buy a backup of the backup, whatever you need to do. Incredible bourbon. So again, thank you guys so much for tuning in to another one of my reviews. If you'd like to follow me, you can on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all of those places at My Bourbon Journey. If you'd like to help support the channel and become part of the Mash and Journey Whiskey Club, make sure you check out the Patreon link in the description below. More importantly, leave a comment below in the description. Let me know your thoughts. Have you gotten into the Batch A122? Your thoughts on that? Where does it compare with some of the other ones, prior to this? For me, this is a huge benchmark, and love to see where they're going with the whole 22 lineup. So, and remember, It's about the journey and not the destination. Cheers, I'm gonna do a little more sipping on the batch A122.